We all know about the saying in the cybersecurity industry that if users or business partners are not willing to do something, you can just beat them with the compliance stick. So the industry has used this for quite a while, for quite some years, and it has worked to some extent, but also to a large extent, it does not work. So what are the dividends of compliance? I mean, what has our focus on compliance brought us over the years? It brought us some good things, but then again, if the past is an indication of the future, we know that compliant organizations are going to still be getting breached because compliance is not equal security. In 2013, Target got breached, and 4 years before that, it was Outland Payment Systems. I'm talking of PCI DSS compliance and EPAR compliance. It's pretty easy. If an organization is compliant, you don't get in any trouble if you get breached. That is the premise of the EPAR compliance, which is counterintuitive because organizations can now focus on getting compliant because they're not going to get punished if they get breached. So with compliance, or with focus on compliance, you can lie to yourself because we know the answer. So we're trying to get to the answer. But if you focus on cyber risk, then you can be honest with yourself. You want to have a good understanding of your highest priority risks so that at least you know about those risks and you can do something about them. So what is the paradigm shift? The paradigm shift is to start focusing less on compliance and more on the cybersecurity program. And as professionals, everything we do is all about reducing the risk to critical assets. And if we do that very well, compliance will come as a byproduct of that. So now, how do we go about it? Before we go into that, what is risk? A lot of all of us take risks, even if we don't fully understand what is risk. Naturally, when you hear the word risk, you think danger because that's the most popular interpretation or outcome of risk taking. So if you belong in this school of thought, you're always going to be thinking of risk as exposure to an adverse event. Now, people like that are referred to as risk averse. But in order for an organization to make profit or to thrive in a particular business sector, you have to take risks. And cybersecurity has to understand this. There's always some level of risk that the organization should be willing to be exposed to achieve its business objective, to progress. So the act of risk taking itself is not necessarily bad. So if you understand the risk that you're taking, and as I said, a lot of us take risks on a day-to-day basis. If you've ever gotten on an airplane before, you've taken risk, and also if you've moved from one location to the other, that risk is several orders of magnitude greater, but you're not going to sit in one place just because you don't want to take risk. And in the first example, getting on an airplane, now this is where articulation of risk is extremely important, and perception of risk based on fact is important. In 2020, global deaths associated with large aircraft was 299. So there were 5 fatalities out of 40, crashes, and 299 people died. Now, I said that risk is several orders of magnitude greater if you're traveling in a car, because in the US, in Q2 of 2020 alone, 8,870 people died as a result of car crashes. So, like I said, articulation of risk is very important. Now, let's look at risk in the enterprise environment. Every organization deals with risks all the time, whether they know it or they don't. It's a reality. There's a big industry that thrives on risk. That's the insurance industry. And if you are within an organization, if you're in management within an organization, you would understand these different types of risks that organizations deal with. You have strategic risk, operational, compliance, financial, and reputational risk. Now, if you look at the first 5 risks there, they are the bottom layer about information risk or cybersecurity risk, touches every aspect of the organizational risk. So, as security professional, if you have an enterprise risk management group within your organization, you want to work closely with them to understand the different categories of risks that the organization deals with. As you can see there in the middle, compliance risk is just one of those types of risks. So if you are focusing on getting compliant, you're only solving 1 of 5 problems. And that does not make your organization secure. Now let's look at element of a good cybersecurity or cyber risk program. So you need to have a sound cyber risk strategy. This is where you need to go ahead and work with the enterprise risk division of your organization to understand the different types of risks they are dealing with or they focus on, and then find alignment opportunities. Find a way to align cyber related activities to each of those risk items. I promise you there will always be opportunities for alignment because the organizations today are driven by information systems. And then after that, you need a solid metrics framework. This is how you measure how you're doing, whether you're doing this well or not. So part of this will be your key performance indicators, whether you're hitting those targets, and the key risk indicators. What's the likelihood of an adverse event occurring? I mean, what are the leading indicators of adverse events? Then you need to have a risk register because at the end of the day, when you identify your risk, you're going to do something. And then you want to keep a record of the risk that you're identifying. And so you need a sound risk, good risk register. And after that, we've seen in the past few months that a lot of adversaries are targeting third party to get to organization because it's just easy to do that. So organizations now need to start looking at their third party suppliers, what level of access they have to the organization, looking at the information security arrangement of those third party suppliers and actually holding them to the security standards of your organization. So these are listed in no particular order, and there are also other good elements of cyber risk program, but these are ones to really bear in mind. So if you're just about to build a cyber risk management program within your organization, ensure that the program has these elements. Now let's look at risk assessment process. So this is a 4-step high-level process. You want to identify the risk within your environment, analyze the risk, evaluate it, and treat it. Risk treatment is also referred to as risk response. So when identifying risk, this is the starting point in the risk assessment process. And it is usually the hardest part because a lot of organizations don't understand how to consistently identify risks in their environment. But once you've identified the risk, you need to analyze it. This is where the cyber risk specialist or the cybersecurity professional earns his or her money. You need to understand how risky is the risk. So consider every data that is available to arrive at an informed risk rating decision. And after that, you need to move into the evaluation phase. So every risk must have an owner within an organization. So typically, this is where pushbacks occur. You take your risk report to a department and they say, no, there is no risk here. So remember, I said articulation of risk is very important. And I'm going to be showing you how to write a risk assessment report in very simple one-page document to ensure that you need to think well about what you're presenting so that you're able to defend it. And then you know the risk owner will not always agree, but it is important that they align. So if you have, this is where your risk management strategy is important. Once it is written, you define how you want to handle risk, how you want to report it, the exception process, tracking and duration of exception, and so on and so forth. So you take that strategy document and socialize it with senior business leaders within the organization so that you can find alignment. Because if someone is pushing back, you go to their management. Because at the end of the day, when bad things happen, and they would most likely happen, when they happen, you can, say, yes, I've done my job as a professional. And after that, you have to treat the risk. After evaluation, you arrive at a middle ground, and then you decide on what treatment action you want to adopt for the risk. You can either accept the risk, avoid it, reduce it, or transfer it. I think that's pretty common. So let's look at risk identification. Typically, risk is identified through periodic audit. When the auditors come, CISO certified professional, they look at your security arrangement. What are the things that you promise to do based on your policies and standard, and what are you actually doing? So they'll find actionable items and then report those items up, and then your organization or management can assign resources to go remediate the findings. Then another way of identifying risk is through penetration tests. Traditionally, these are two means of identifying risk consistently, right? But there's a third one. It is called controls gap analysis. This is where, consider this like a self-assessment, but it's a technical self-assessment of some sorts where the information security department looks at the key controls within its organization to find holes, to find weaknesses. So these are traditionally the way that organizations, periodic audit and penetration tests, traditionally the ways that organizations identify risk consistently. But as security professionals, we should be doing more of this so that we are prepared for periodic audit, so that the findings of penetration test engagement, would not be a lot, so that you're not. Controls gap analysis is a proactive way of understanding where you are in your security program. Now, risk analysis, following identification of risk, you need to analyze the risk. And this is pretty common formula for risk. What is the likelihood of bad thing occurring? And what is the impact on the business if it occurs? And this is where you rate the risk. So this is a qualitative approach to risk analysis, and it goes by likelihood, increasing likelihood on the y-axis, and then increasing business impact on the x-axis. So what you want to avoid is the rates, right? If something is highly likely to occur, you want to reduce the likelihood of that occurring. So you want to go to like medium or low. And then you cannot do much about the business impact. So what you can affect is the likelihood. So you want to make sure that you're looking at your security controls, because what controls the likelihood of occurrence is the strength of your security controls. So you have to look at, that's why controls gap analysis is very important. So once you identify gaps in your control, you fix the gaps, you test, ensure that your program is in a healthy state. And then risk evaluation, like I said, happens after analysis. And before that happens, you have to communicate the risk somehow to the risk owners. And by the way, you have to identify the risk owners within your organization. So this is an example of a risk assessment report. It's a one-pager with 3 sections. Basically, you want to communicate the issue, right? So what is the issue here? Here you're stating facts, right? This is a penetration testing finding, an audit finding, or the outcome of a controls gap analysis is fact because you have evidence, you can substantiate it. Now, because of that issue, what is the risk? What is the concern? And this is the main part of this report, right? So this is where you write your risk statement, and you look at the organization's, what the organization is trying to do. How could actualization of this risk affect our business goals? So you state the bad things that can happen under this category, and then this section, so remember I said the first section is you're stating fact. In this second section, you're stating your professional opinion, and then you have to be prepared to defend it. And the last section is, okay, now that you've stated all this, what should we do about it, or what can we do about it? And this is where you look at your cyber risk management policy or standard or strategy to relate with risk owners about what should be done about the risk. They can decide to accept, avoid, reduce, or transfer. But what is very important in this case, in my experience, is that in order to make a decision, typically as a security professional, your dream choice here is reduction, risk mitigation. That is what you want the risk owner to do, or to the department that owns the information system to do about the risk. But a lot of business partners would want to, if there is an option to accept the risk, they want to take that option. You want to make sure that if they want to go down the acceptance path, you have to make sure that someone that is senior enough, like an executive, is the one making that decision, not just a manager or a director or an head of department. So if an executive makes that decision, is making that decision for the whole department. Then if you are the chief information security officer or the CIO, you have to keep reminding your peers that this is something we're running with. And, thankfully, a lot of organizations are getting breached every day. So a lot of business leaders are starting to understand what cybersecurity means to the business. So, at this point, you just make that decision and then record it. If it's a risk that's been treated, you need to record it. So now the last one is risk treatment. And there's a simple formula for this. The RR stand for residual risk. Sorry, residual risk is equal to inherent risk or the raw risk plus control. So the residual risk is the risk that remains after you've treated the risk. So there's always going to be residual risk. So if you have a high risk, your goal is to reduce it to what is called acceptable level. An acceptable level has to be defined in your cybersecurity, in your cyber risk management strategy. This is where we talk about the risk appetite curve, which is beyond the scope of this presentation. But an organization has to have a risk appetite statement, and everyone has to be familiar with that statement. And this is where you know whether a certain risk has been reduced to what is referred to as acceptable level. So if you go from high to low, an organization can say, yes, we've done enough, close that one off. We can live with the low risk. So this is what the risk register looks like, a very simplistic view. What do you have to have? You have a column for the risk summary, the description of it, what's the likelihood, what's the impact, recommended mitigation, and who owns it. So you have to keep a record of it. There are a lot of vendors in this space, SaaS providers, but you can use a simple spreadsheet if you can afford to subscribe to some of these expensive solutions. The important thing is to ensure that you have an awareness of security risks within your department. So then lastly, I will show you how to consistently identify risks in your environment and do something about the risk, and then keep track of what you're doing, because at the end of the day, you want to be honest to yourself. You want to know whether you're delivering value as a security professional. And this is how to ensure that this is how to plan for upcoming year, and also prioritize. If you want to make an investment in a technology solution, you have to be able to talk about why you're making that investment instead of just blindly, going for a DLP solution or for a cloud security solution and spending like 50% of your budget without really understanding, the over contribution of that solution to your overall security goal. So the first thing you want to do is to set yourself a goal, right? And that goal has to be about the type of cyber attack that you want to prevent. And after you have that, as security professionals, I know we have many goals. So you understand your business environment, your information systems, and that goal has to be tracking the goal of your organization, your strategic objectives. And then for every goal, you have an objective, that supports the goal. So what actions are we taking to accomplish our goals? And after that, you look at the tactical initiatives that you need to fulfill your objective. Okay. And then this is where we come to risk. Okay, we understand our goal, we understand our objective and the initiatives that are required to fulfill this objective. But what is the risk? What if we don't do anything? Right? It is at that point that it becomes clear to you how your inaction can affect your cyber defense goal. Okay, so if you choose to do nothing at that point, at least you have an awareness of the risk that you're taking as a department. If the business chooses to do nothing, at least everybody has an awareness of the risk you're taking as an organization. And that risk goes in the risk register. And once you've identified the risk, if you do decide to do something about it, you move to risk analysis and evaluation. How severe is the risk? And our business leaders aligned on way forward. So you have, these key goals every year. Most departments would have what is called goals for the year. That's what your performance review is based on. And this is an easy way of setting goals for the security department year on year. And most of the time, it's not going to change because we're not dealing with the cyber threat landscape evolves a lot. By the end of the day, the adversaries want to do stuff that you don't want them to do. So your goals have to be based around, will be based on the knowledge of what they're trying to do. And this is how you get your cyber risk dashboard. And every item on the risk dashboard must be traceable to at least one cyber defense goal. So this is an high-level overview of what I call the risk metrics framework or cyber risk metrics framework. So let's apply that to one cyber defense goal so that you can see this in action. So practical application. Let's assume that our goal is to promptly detect suspected breach of business critical information system within the organization. Okay. What objective will support that goal? You want to maintain situational awareness of events, of anomalous events or events of concern on your network. That is the objective that supports that goal. Because in order to promptly detect, you have to be watching. And in order to watch, you need to have something that enables watching. So tactical initiative is to implement and configure your SIM tool to detect events of concern. If you cannot do that, then you have to enlist the help of a managed detection and response service provider. That is the tactical initiative. Now, if you're planning for the coming year or you're looking at your security program, now you know what you need to go and do. And if you don't do it, what is the risk? The risk is increased adversarial dwell time. As a matter of fact, you probably have zero chance. If you don't, there's a common saying in cybersecurity that prevention is ideal. That's what you should do. But detection is a must. So you're not going to be able to prevent every bad event, stop the adversary from getting into your organization. But at least you should be able to detect the presence of an unwanted guest within your environment. Okay, so in the traditional, to draw an analogy in the traditional world, if you build fence and gates and everything around your house, that doesn't necessarily stop an intruder from getting in. But at least if they get in, you have to know that they're in your environment. Now in the security world, if you don't have a SIM tool, then your chances of detecting bad stuff occurring within your environment are significantly reduced. So then we move on to risk analysis and evaluation. And no question, this is a high severity risk. For example, you don't know whether you will not be able to answer the question whether you're leaking proprietary data, or whether someone is making, an adversary is making lateral movement within your organization. You're flying blind for basically. So there's no point if you have if you're a security department within an organization and you don't have this capability, then you're fighting a losing battle. So lastly, this becomes a dashboard item, and that's how you arrive at the risk. High risk. This is how you can communicate to the business. We have a risk in this area in that we are unable to detect breach of business critical information system. That brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope you've learned a thing or two